Alrighty, welcome back. This is the first time that we're doing this show weekly as opposed to daily, which means that instead of chasing every headline, we actually get to zoom out a bit. And so this week gave us plenty to work with. So let's break down the biggest stories, what actually happened and why they matter. Now let's get into it. South Africa's post office may finally be heading for its last delivery. You see, the company's business rescue practitioners have warned that they intend to apply for liquidation, a move that would effectively shut the institution down after years of losses and repeated attempts to keep the company afloat. So to understand how we got here, we need to rewind to 2023. You see, the post office entered business rescue after mounting debts and a steady decline in traditional mail. Now, the stated plan was to slim the organization, close unprofitable branches, retrench staff, and rebuild it into something that might survive in a world of couriers and online communication. You see, overseas, many postal services have survived the shift by reinventing themselves, focusing on parcel delivery, e-commerce logistics, and even financial services. In South Africa, similar turnaround ideas had been discussed for years, but the execution never really matched the ambition. Government has already poured billions of rands into this institution to try and keep it going, and the latest rescue plan was supposed to include another 3.8 billion rand injection. But Treasury has since made it clear that funding was never formally committed, and furthermore, it didn't appear in the latest national budget. And so that's where the tension now sits. These rescue practitioners say that they can't complete this turnaround without the money, while Communications Minister insists that talks of liquidation is still premature and says that discussions with Treasury are still ongoing, which leaves the post office in a very familiar kind of limbo, technically still being rescued, but increasingly running out of time. South Africa could be taking its first step towards high-speed passenger trains connecting major cities. Now, President Ramaphosa says that government has launched what's called a request for information, essentially asking both investors and engineers whether a rapid rail system connecting key metros could ever realistically be built. And so if it ever materialized, it could transform long-distance travel in South Africa, where moving between major cities still largely depends on flying or spending hours on the road. For now, though, this isn't a construction announcement. You see, a request for information, or RFI, is the earliest stage of infrastructure planning, a way for government to test whether private companies would actually be interested in financing, designing, and operating a project like this. And so in practical terms, officials are simply asking the market a question here. If South Africa wanted high-speed rail between its biggest cities, would anyone be willing to build it? And that question matters because this idea runs straight into a difficult reality. You see, South Africa's existing passenger rail system has spent years shrinking due to vandalism, underinvestment, and operational failure. And so while high-speed trains do sound like the future, the real test is actually whether the country can first stabilize the rail network it has before trying to build a faster one on top of it. So the shutdown of Showmax is already starting to raise bigger questions. You see, regulators are starting to ask whether this move still fits with the conditions attached to the recent takeover of MultiChoice by this French media giant Canal+. And so in simple terms, a major streaming platform is disappearing not long after the deal was approved. And authorities now want to understand how that lines up with the promises that were made when the takeover went through. But you see, many people don't know that this takeover actually came with conditions attached. Canal+ promised that it would keep backing South African productions, keep investing in local content, and continue to work with these smaller companies that made these shows possible. And so the idea was simple. This takeover could go ahead, but the local TV industry shouldn't end up worse off because of it. And so that's where the pressure now sits. If Showmax disappears and some of the contracts linked to the platform are cancelled, regulators want to be sure that the commitments tied to the takeover still hold up. And so in other words, the deal may be done, but the promises made during the approval process are still very much under the microscope. So credit cards are starting to do more of the heavy lifting in South African households. It's becoming less of a just-in-case tool and more of a we'll figure it out later kind of strategy. And so according to the Consumer Default Index, overall credit performance has actually improved slightly, especially on big debts like home loans. But beneath that surface, the pressure is shifting. So here's the thing, debts on unsecured credit, things like credit cards or personal loans, are rising, especially among high-income consumers. And so in simple terms, households are still able to keep up with their bonds and car repayments, but short-term debt is starting to carry a lot more of the load. And so that's where this squeeze shows up, because while these big payments are still being prioritized, everyday expenses still need to be covered, and increasingly this is happening on credit. And so over time, this kind of reliance can build up, especially with credits in the mix, which means that even these households that look financially stable on paper may be feeling a lot more stretched month to month. The world is scrambling for new minerals. Gold and silver are on a tear, copper demand is surging, and governments around the world are racing to secure future supply. But while exploration spending globally is heating up, South Africa just hit a 7-year low in mining exploration. Now that matters because exploration is the very first step in the mining pipeline. You see, before a single shaft is sunk, companies spend years, sometimes even decades, searching for deposits worth developing. In other words, exploration determines where the next generations of mines exist. And right now, South Africa attracts less than 1% of global exploration funding, as investors increasingly favor countries where mining rights are approved faster and regulations are clearer. Yet the irony is hard to miss. You see, South Africa remains one of the world's most mineral-rich countries, from platinum and manganese to gold and chrome, yet it is slowly being bypassed in the global race to discover the next ones. It's like tripping over your own feet in a race that you're set to win. You see, the resources are there, the demand is rising, but without fixing the system that allows that exploration to happen, those future discoveries and the jobs, the investments, the exports that come with them may end up happening somewhere else. And on to our bagel bite of the day, but first, just a side note, if you're enjoying today's show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It's the only way we grow. And now, with that out the way, let's see what you got. The question is, which country is the largest landlocked country in the world? Is it A, Kazakhstan, B, Mongolia, or C, the Democratic Republic of Congo? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. So if you're curious what South African parents are naming their babies these days, the latest data from Stats.SA offers a fascinating snapshot. Now, one thing becomes obvious pretty quickly, given South Africa's demographics. Don't expect to be looking at a leadership board filled with Cheslins or Tatianas. Now, for the boys, the names that currently top the charts are Lotabo, Lubanzi, and Nkazimulo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And like many South African names, they carry powerful meanings. Lotabo translates to joy or happiness. Lubanzi means wide or expansive. And Nkazimulo means glory or splendor. Now, they're names that don't just identify someone. They often express a wish or hope for the child's life. Now, on the girls' side, the most popular names are Onalarona, Zanokushle, and Melokushle. Again, I hope I pronounced that correctly. These names follow a similar tradition of these meaning-rich names. Onalarona roughly translates to God is with us. Zanokushle means to bring what is good. And Melokushle can be interpreted as a stand for good or to uphold what is beautiful. And so if names really do carry a glimpse of these kids' futures, then you know what? The next generation of South Africans being welcomed into the world are coming with some very awesome expectations. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is Kazakhstan. I know it surprised me too. It is by far the largest landlocked country in the world. For context, it is nearly 4 times bigger than Mongolia, the next closest on the list, which gives you a sense of just how dominant it is in this category. And my friends, that's it for our first weekly show. Thanks so much for tuning in until the very end. Hey, be sure to keep an eye out for our new posts and daily reels throughout the week. We've been working on a lot behind the scenes, and it's all geared towards making this offering better every single week. And so we really do appreciate the patience as we navigate this new phase, but we're really excited for what's coming. And so either way, I hope you guys have a fantastic week further. Remember, be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all next Sunday for your next dose of the good stuff. God bless.